Hello, my name's Roisin, with, let's face it, a bit of a crush now, actually. I don't know why I've never done that reference before at the beginning of my video. It just popped into my head as I turned on the camera. But 10 points to you if you get that reference and I don't actually seem like I have just lost all of my marbles. So today's video is going to be a quick video where I'm introducing to you this jar. As you may know, if you've been watching my channel, throughout this year, every month, I have been giving myself a TBR challenge in which I read books that are related to a certain theme. So I have done the most popular historical fiction in 2020, the UK's favourite historical fiction, books that you guys recommended me. Whilst doing this, I've also been keeping track of all of my stats and things, and I have noticed that doing these challenges has very, very much whitewashed my reading this year. I have not been reading as... Thank you, Crow. I have not been reading as diversely this year as I did last year so far, and I wanted to rectify that. So obviously I can do that by outside of my challenges reading other stuff and being more mindful of what I'm reading, but I also had an idea for another challenge. So last year I spoke about wanting to read around the world and read from countries that I had never read from before, but sticking to that without something a clear way of doing it, I had found quite tricky. I did read from several countries that I had never read from before, but nowhere near as many as I wanted to. I had already planned out all of the challenges I was going to do this year, because I love planning, but I decided to remove half of them and to do something different every other month from now until I run out of things in my jar. So half of the month I will still do the challenges that I have already set for myself because I chose the ones that I still really, really wanted to do. But for the rest of the months I am going to be reading... Thank you, Crow. But for the rest of the months I'm going to be reading the regions. That's what I've decided to call this. This is my world TBR jar. So, these might end up going into a smaller jar because my jar looks quite empty compared to everyone else's TBR jars. It's something that I've seen all over BookTube. So people list all of the books that they own on their TBR and they put them in a jar and every month take out a certain number and they have to read that book. What I have decided to do is to put regions in my jar. The way that my challenges generally work is that I pick 5 books in a certain theme and I read them all over the course of the month and I talk to you about them, about what I thought of the books, about the theme and how they all link together, etc, etc. So I've decided that to do that I'm going to read a region. Now, I could have either put continents in here, in which case there would have only been 7, but it wouldn't have taken me that long to get through all of them, or I could have put countries, which would have obviously taken me a lot longer, but I decided what to do instead was to put regions in here. The reason for I chose regions over countries is because whilst I think that reading 5 books from a country is going to give you a much more broad overview of that country than reading 5 books from a region gives you an overview of a region, because obviously there's a lot of diversities within regions, I do think that being the monolingual pleb that I am, trying to find 5 books translated into English from some countries was going to be very, very difficult. On the other hand, I didn't just want to choose continents because, of course, that is even more broad. And if I just picked out Asia, how am I going to cover the whole broad Asia from Palestine to Japan, including Kazakhstan and Sri Lanka? Like, that's a really, really broad cross-section of countries. So I have narrowed it down to regions. So I'm going to tell you what my regions are, but I did just want to caveat that there are countries here that are borderline that could fit into 2 different regions. I have chosen a region for them and I've put them in one of those, but the borders are arbitrary, obviously. Borders are man-made and arbitrary, and so the borders of where I've chosen to put countries are also man-made and arbitrary. Some countries I wasn't sure if they were in Europe or Asia. I've just plumped for one and we're going to go with that. So what I have is I have all of my regions listed on paper in this jar, and then I also have an Excel spreadsheet because I love an Excel spreadsheet where I have listed all of the regions, all of the countries in those regions, and ideas for books that I could read that are from different countries in those regions. Another thing that I've decided to do is when I pick a region out of my jar, I am not going to read books from countries that I have read from before. Because although, obviously, as I said earlier, reading one book from a country doesn't make you an expert in that country, For example, if I pull West Africa out of this jar, I am not then going to read books from Nigeria. And the reason I'm not going to read books from Nigeria is because I have already read a lot of books from Nigeria. Well, a fair few books from Nigeria anyway. And if I just read more Nigerian books, I'm not broadening my understanding of that area. There are lots of different countries in there that I could read from. So I could be picking books from Sierra Leone and Ghana and Niger that would be a different reading experience to reading more books set in Nigeria, which I've already done a fair amount of. So I'm going to be reading from countries that are new to me, and I'm going to be reading 5 from a specific region. So let's talk about the regions, shall we? So the first, this is just in alphabetical order. The first one is Aboriginal, Maori and Torres Strait Islander. So this is specifically to be reading Indigenous literature from Australia, New Zealand and Torres Strait Islands. The second region is Arabic, which is obviously a language, not a region, but I'm just specifically all of the countries that have Arabic as an official language. I'm going to pick books from them. Obviously you have North African countries, you have Arabian Peninsula countries, so there's a lot of variation in there, but I think there's going to be a link there because of Arab expansion, and there will be some history in common, I believe. Then I also have Australia and New Zealand. Now, of course, I've already mentioned that I have Aboriginal and Maori, which is the same part of the world, but I really wanted to focus on Indigenous when I was picking Aboriginal and Maori, and to focus on other Australian and New Zealand stories. I might include an Aboriginal or Maori or both story in that, but I also have not read a lot of fiction from Australia or New Zealand, and there are also, of course, different perspectives to be read there from non-white perspectives on those countries that are also non-Indigenous, which I think would be interesting. I read Amnesty by Aravinda Diga, which is about a Sri Lankan immigrant to Australia last year, so I have read some from Australia, but I still wanted to include it because it's definitely not, it's like the US. I have not included USA or UK in here as part of the regions because that's where most of my reading is from. So I've left them out, apart from Indigenous literature, which I'll come to later. In terms of Australia and New Zealand, I've definitely not read as much fiction from there as I have from the UK and the US, so I wanted to include them as well. Then we have the Balkans. Balkan countries are in the south of Europe. Balkan countries I think are mostly former Yugoslav countries, and that definitely, I don't think I've read one Albanian piece of fiction, but it's not an area that I've read a lot from. Then I have Brazil. So I've included Brazil and some other countries, which we'll come to later, on their own as a just one section. The reason I've singled out Brazil is because they speak Portuguese, not Spanish, so it's going to be slightly different for that reason, but also because it is further from the north of Brazil to the south of Brazil than it is from the north of Brazil to the south of Canada. Brazil is a massive country, and I feel like there's a lot of literature in there that I could read from. Indigenous Brazilian people, Latino Brazilian people, Black Brazilian people. It's a big mix of cultures, and so I think there's going to be like a lot of different stuff to read. And then I have Caribbean literature, and this is specifically the islands of the Caribbean, because then I also have Central American countries as separate from that, Central America and Mexico. But I have included Mexico in Central America, even though Mexico is technically in North America, because I haven't included North America because I've read a lot of American and Canadian fiction. Hopefully that makes sense. And I haven't just put Latin America because I've separated out South and Central America to make sure that I'm hitting as many countries as possible. So then I also have Central Africa in here, and I think that this year is the first time I've ever read a book by a Central African author. I read The Death of Comrade President by Alain Mabako, but it's definitely something that I need to read more about because one Congolese author is not enough Central African authors. And then also Central Asia, Afghanistan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, all of that. And I've also in this section included Armenia, Azerbaijan and Georgia, because I wasn't quite sure where else to put them. They're one of the people where they could go in various different parts, but I've included them here. Then I've also included China as its own thing, similar to Brazil, very big country. Then we have East Africa, and again, I think I've only read one East African author, which is The Shadow King by Maza Mengiste, and I absolutely love that, but again, lots of different countries in East Africa. If you would like, in the comments, let me know if you would like to see the spreadsheet. I've got lots of different books and recommendations on here, so let me know in the description and I will try and find a way to share that with you if that's something you would like. Then we also have Eastern Europe, then we have the Indian subcontinent, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Maldives, Nepal, Pakistan and Sri Lanka. Then North American Indigenous, and I have written down all the major language groups here as far as I'm aware, but I definitely need to do more research on that. Then we have Northeast Asia, which is Japan, Mongolia, North and South Korea and Taiwan. Northern Europe, which I have included Ireland on here, but again, like with Nigeria, I'm not going to be reading any Irish fiction for this challenge because I've read a lot of Irish fiction in the past. Pacific Islands, so I've got a list of all of the Pacific Islands here, and then Persia/Iran, again another very large country with a lot of history specifically. That's why I kept Iran separate, because I feel like there's a range of classics from Iran. It's a place where there is writing that has been translated into English from Iran since ancient Greek times, so I feel like there's a lot of range of classics there that I could read. Then Russia, again, biggest country in the world, Russia, so I felt like it had to be separated on its own. Like, where else are you going to put it? Is it Northern Europe? Is it Central Asia? Is it East Asia? Could be any of those things, so it's just Russia. Then I've got Latin American Indigenous authors. Again, I want to make sure that I'm reading as many Indigenous authors as possible. South America, then Southeast Asia, again an area that I haven't read a lot from. Southern Africa, which I don't think I've ever read a Southern African author before, so definitely one I want to get to. And as I mentioned in the beginning, my final one here alphabetically is West Africa. So I also wanted to talk to you about some of the areas that I get my recommendations from. So there are lots of great bookstagrammers that are talking about books from around the world, which I will leave in the description below, a lot of them, but particularly NovelAllure. NovelAllure is a brilliant bookstagrammer. She is so sarky. I love her stories, but she also posts absolutely beautiful imagery and like recommendations of books from various different regions, which is really helpful for me, and I think she does such a good job of like collating all that information, so I would definitely go and check her out. Then we also have AfricLit for African suggestions, Book of Cinz for Caribbean suggestions. I've mentioned her before. She runs the Caribbean Readathon in June, I believe, so there's a lot of Caribbean Readathon, Caribbean suggestions from her. Book Riot also has lots of lists of books from around the world, which again I will leave in the description. It's a really useful resource for that sort of thing. A Year of Reading the World is also a blog that has collated a lot of this information, and again will be in the description. Simon Haisell on Bookstagram has also been reading around the world, so I will leave his information in the description as well, and I know I have some others saved, so I will leave loads of resources in the description if you would like to do a challenge similar to this, or just are looking for some more recommendations from countries other than the UK and the US. I would check out the description below. So that is my new challenge. I'm going to be picking out a different region every other month to try and read 5 books from said region, and we will see how well we do. I'm very excited for this. I think it's going to be a really good challenge. I think there's lots of different places to read from, and once I've gone through all the regions I might just start again, because there will still be countries that I haven't read from, or we'll see how we go once we have finished. So thank you for watching. That is all for today. Please let me know what you think in the description, if you've got any recommendations for me, or any people to follow, people who are giving out recommendations. I would love to hear from you. Please remember to give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and to subscribe, because I put out new videos every Wednesday, Friday and Sunday, and so I will see you again very, very soon. Bye bye.